Welcome to the Influential Personal Brand Podcast. This is the place where we help mission-driven messengers just like you learn how to build and monetize your personal brand. My name is Rory Vaden, and I'm the co-founder of Brand Builders Group, a Hall of Fame speaker, and New York Times bestselling author. And this show is to help experts learn how to become more wealthy and well-known. I know you're going to love it. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. Hey there, it's Rory Vaden. You are about to hear an interview of me interviewing my mother, telling the story of her real life. And I wanted to give you fair warning, a trigger warning, that this story is her real life story, and we are going to cover some topics that might trigger, intense emotional responses. And we are covering topics of abortion, and also domestic violence and alcoholism and things that were a part of her life. And I just want to let you know that ahead of time. So this is a departure from our normal scheduled programming, and it's the true story of my mom and how I came to be. And so I just want to give you a heads up if you want to skip past this. Also, this is not the general direction or content or theme of our podcast. This is a special Mother's Day edition that we wanted to share so you could really understand where I came from and where she came from and all the people who helped us. And a part of that is understanding some dramatic parts of her real life story. So just a heads up, we try to keep it tasteful and brief and not too in depth, but those are parts of her story, and so they are shared in this interview. All right. I hope you find it encouraging and uplifting. Well, today is truly a special honor. I am going to introduce you to someone who's not only changed my life and impacted my life, but who gave me my life. I am interviewing my mom. This is my mother, who you're about to meet. We've never had her on the show. We've never really done anything public together, but I wanted to share this story because I share so much of her story as part of my story in terms of where we began and what life was like when I was first born. But I never really tell her story. What is the backstory before I was around? And I often don't get a chance to share the story of where she's at now. So usually when I'm telling my story, I talk about sort of the intersection point of when I was a kid and she was raising me. But this woman is incredible. You are separate from being my mom. You're about to hear, I think, one of the most dramatic, compelling, true stories of a person who has made a huge impact, not just in my life, but in the whole world. So what other introduction can I do except say, I'm so grateful for this woman and everything that she's done for me and all the sacrifices she has made in my life for me and my brother and my dad and our family. So welcome to the show, Rory's mom, Tessie Gale. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Rory. Well, thank you so much for having me. I feel very honored and blessed, and yeah, I'm glad to be here. And if my story can impact anybody, even one person, to have hope and you know that whatever they're going through right now is for a reason, and the Lord has a plan for each one of us.
Yeah, and that is what I wanna start by understanding the real story of where you were at when you became a mom and what was going on in your life. Um, so because I think I think people look at me and AJ and our family and where we're at today, and they might assume like, hey, you guys have always been successful and had nice things and lived in nice homes and traveled the world and da da da. Even our own grandkids, or your grandkids, my kids, right? Jasper
Yeah.
and Liam. I remember we went to a sporting event not that long ago, and I remember we walked in and Jasper looked at us and he said, Mommy, where is our room? Because we got free tickets from our bank to have box seats. And they had so many of sporting events they've been to where they've sat in a box. And I'm like, you little spoiled brats. I never ever had box seats ever until like my late 20s.
Mhm.
And then I compare that and contrast that with how I grew up and then really how you grew up and where you were. And so I want to share that story. So talk us through, let's start with high school, I think, and you can go back a little bit, but tell me about when you got pregnant and kind of walk me through what your life was like in high school when you first got pregnant and kind of like up through those, the first 5 years of Randy being born and then, you
Sure,
having me.
sure, sure. Well, I was the oldest of five children, and I was born to a lower middle class Latino family. My dad was an iron worker, and my mom was a nurse's aide and cooked for the priest. And growing up Catholic, we went to Catholic school, and I went to Catholic school for 11 years.
Hmm,
And I was junior class president and very involved in school. And my junior year of high
high
school,
school.
I went to I started working at Winchell's Donuts was my first job.
Nice.
And I met Danny, who was not, um, you know, wasn't part of my circle of friends or anything like that. Were very different. Anyway, so we were in love, right? And so at 17, ending my junior year, I got pregnant with my first child with Randy. And I was going to be obviously it didn't sit very well with my folks. However, I was going to be 18, um, and by the time Randy was born. And so my dad gave us a wedding in the backyard, and that's summer of 76. And we got married, and he joined the Navy so we could pay for our child, right? I mean, how are we going to pay for him? So we did that. And then soon after, I had left high school my senior year because of obvious reasons. However, I was really close to getting my high school diploma. I was short like a couple credits. And so I was able to go to the local adults night school and actually receive my high school diploma right after Randy was born. And so I got my high school diploma, and I made a commitment that someday I would go to college. And we
And so
moved
just to be, so you got pregnant when you're 17,
about
but
17 and a half almost.
17 and a half. But so when Randy was born, you technically were 18. So
I was
you
right,
got to determine
right.
whether or not you were going to raise him. So you were very, very young, but you didn't have to put him up for adoption or into the system because you were an adult. You got to make that decision technically by the time he was actually born.
Absolutely. And
Mm.
that was a very very important, very important.
But that had
And
to be a tough decision. I mean, not knowing what you know now, like having a son, but I mean, being pregnant in high school, like that couldn't have been an easy. That can't be an easy circumstance.
No, no, but I was the other thing too was being the oldest of five, I raised my siblings. And
Mm,
so I mean, I was changing diapers with your aunt when she was a baby. I was 7 years old. So I've been changing diapers and playing mommy with kids since I was 7 years old,
yeah.
basically. And I think that is where my love for children come from, was one of the places,
So
right?
then walk me through what happens next. In your first marriage, I know that there were a couple difficult things that happened over the subsequent years. So obviously you and your first husband didn't have a lot of money. You're
Right.
pregnant, you had a baby, you're 18 years old, you get your high school diploma by going to night school. And then what happens those next couple years?
So then Randy Dan and I moved down to San Diego, and he gets out of the service. He just basically did boot camp, and he was able to get out of the service and got a job at Winchell's. And um I was 8 weeks Randy was 8 weeks. I'm sorry. Randy was 8 weeks when I got pregnant again. And you're right. I mean, we had no money, nothing. And so he drove me down to San Diego, downtown San Diego, to the abortion clinic. And I had my first abortion there. And it was really awful. I was really scared. Um, and, but there was no way. I mean, in my mind at that time, there was no way. And when he picked me up, he just said that, we would never ever talk about this again, and that, we wouldn't tell no one, not even our parents, nobody. And if I ever got pregnant again, that he would leave me. And so, of course, 18 years old, so you got to remember, I was raised in the church. I knew that that was wrong. And yet I had no network, no family, nobody around me except him at that time. So we did that. And then, our marriage was always a struggle. And then what happened was
I mean, clearly, I mean, that's understandable, right? You're young kids, you have a child, you go through this abortion experience, you have no college education at this point. You're trying to make it. You're
I didn't
working
have
at.
a job.
You didn't have a job.
I didn't have a job at this point.
He's working at Winchell's Donuts.
Right.
You get pregnant, have an abortion. Then what happens?
Then we ended up moving to Colorado. We came from for Thanksgiving, and I didn't want to go back. And so he went back, got our stuff. And so we ended up, his parents lived here, or his mom and his mom's wife, or his mom's not wife, husband. And so Grandma Elaine and Mike lived here in Colorado. And then they leave. They're only there for 6 months, and then they get transferred to Texas. So now I'm alone, and we're 19 years old, 20 years old, and they leave. So in January of 1980, we end up moving to Boulder, Colorado, and we get a donut shop to manage, and we become the managers of that in Boulder. And we had enough money to get a mobile home at this time, and so we moved in next door to Don and Shelley, which God blessed us with these neighbors. And we ran the donut shop for probably a couple years maybe, and that one probably a year or so. And so then again, we were growing apart. And I think that I had that resentment from, I always wanted another child. I mean, I always wanted another child. And Randy wanted a sibling. I mean, Randy wanted a sibling. So at 3.5 years old, I get pregnant again. But this time I don't tell my husband right away. And then at 11.5 weeks, so almost 3 months, he drives me to the hospital. And for the second time, I have a second abortion. And I remember waking up and the nurse saying to me, "She's gone, and you can go back to your life now." And so that day, I cried out to God, and I promised that I would never, ever allow this to happen again. And the little love that I had for Dan was gone, died that day. But the shame and guilt stayed with me for a long time. But I do want you to know, Rory, that on that bed before I left that hospital, I also begged God that if I ever got pregnant again, that I would offer that child to him to
Uh-huh.
share and to help be his will or whatever.
So so then what happens with Danny? So you have
We split
a
up.
second abortion, you split up, and then what?
So we split up, and my mom used to always say, it's too bad you guys couldn't have stayed business partners, but we split up and he went back to California. And this time it was like around 1981, and he went back in the summer. Well, there was a man, his name was Tom McLaughlin, who um was a customer, a local customer. He worked at the CU Boulder. He was the paint foreman at the time and would come in. And so um we started dating. I mean, he was handsome and tall. He was 12 years older than me. So at this time, I'm like 23 years old. And he was intelligent. He had huge dimples, and he was a very, very handsome man. And he was from New York. I had never been anywhere east of Colorado up to this point. And so um, we started dating, and I got pregnant with you. And he was thrilled. He was absolutely thrilled. So he was 35 years old, somewhere around there, never been married, never had any children. However, the I was 8 months pregnant when I walked down the aisle with you, and that was the month that he lost his job. And so what I didn't realize was that he was an alcoholic. And that day, that time period, he started becoming very verbally and emotionally abusive. Um, when he wasn't drinking, he was wonderful. He was wonderful.
And when you talk about verbally and emotionally abusive, what are the I mean, this is now your second marriage. You're
Mm-hmm,
20, you're 23, still no college education. You're
mm-hmm.
working at Winchell's. You're by
Oh,
yourself.
oh, 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 oh. No, let's back up. So, God always provides a way, and God works in mysterious ways. I've told you that your whole life. And so, one of the things was when Dan went back to California, Randy and I stayed. And I got a job because of a customer of mine at a company called Storage Tech. And so they were a computer-based company. And I ended up getting a job in their cafeteria at that time. And I was the banquet coordinator. I used to serve the lunches to all the C-suite executives and the high-end clients, Xerox, Honeywell, clients like that, 3M, those type of
How much are you
people.
making in that job? Because now your ex-husband left, his
Hmm.
parents left. You've
Hmm.
got no family in Colorado. You're staying there. You
Hmm.
have no college degree. You have some work experience at Winchell's, but you're a single mom. You've been through two abortions, and
Hmm.
now you get a job. How much are you making?
$5.64 an hour.
Gosh.
But I had life insurance and I had medical benefits. And that's what I paid to have you. That's how I was able to have you. And so Tom and I are struggling at this point. I had moved in, or he had moved in with me and Randy while I was pregnant with you. And, had my mobile home and didn't like my mobile home. And,
So you had me. So he moved in with us. So you had me You guys
We
got
got
married.
married we got married when I was 8 months pregnant with you. And so he moved in.
Okay.
And then you were born 1 month later, just 1 month later.
Okay. And when you say abusive, can you just like what exactly does that mean? So he wasn't physically abusive, but he was
Right. No, he was not. He had never hit me. He had never hit me up to this point, and he was always ranting and raving. His father died. His father committed suicide when he was older, when he was in his 50s or whatever, and Tom was older. He was in his 20s. And that affected him a lot, I think. And well, I know.
sure.
And he was drinking, and so he would just get very belligerent, very argumentative, call me names, um, which by the way, the first one used to do that too. But anyway, so my self-esteem is starting to go into the toilet, right? And but again, I had the Lord, even though I knew that I had had been separated from him and walked away from my values. And at this time I wasn't going to church, right? The church kind of disowned me. I mean, I wasn't going to church. And so um but I knew, I just knew that that there was something better. And so we struggled too. But Don and Shelley, I mean, and at this time also, Charlie, you know him as Uncle Charlie. I mean, he had a print shop next to Winchell's Donuts, and we became friends. He was a single dad, and we were just friends. And he had a boy that was just a year older than Randy, and so um, he was in the picture, I guess. The three of them were pretty much, and Betsy. I mean, from work. So before I left Tom, so at this time, I'm working in storage tech as in the cafeteria. 6 months later, I meet who I call my Colorado dad, Chuck. And he needed to create a job because of the rule breaking cowboys, that engineers, he used to call them, that were losing all these parts all over the country. And it was costing the division a lot of money. And so he had to find the right person for this position. This was a brand new position, hadn't been created. And so he interviewed me because he liked the fact that if I could work at a donut shop and deal with all these personalities, that surely I could corral these guys.
I mean, clearly that's one of the things like you've always been very resourceful with relationships, being adaptable to people and environments. Like even in high school, I know you were friends with the like the Latinos, and you were friends with the nerds and friends with the jocks and friends with the popular, like, and then at Winchell's you're meeting all kinds of people, and here at Storage Tech you go from basically being cafeteria uh you know
Marketing.
person to marketing and managing like a bunch of engineers, and then making friends with the neighbors and all that sort of stuff. So when does Tom leave? So Tom never hits you or anything like that, but you guys split up when?
Okay. So Tom did hit me. But before that, so one time he trashed our house. I came home and he was just, he was drunk, and he just trashed our house. So you were a baby, and Randy was 5.5, so he remembers this. And so we went to the Boulder Safe House for 3 days, just for 3 days. And when we came back, I told him, he apologized and all that, but I told him, if you ever raise your hand to hit me or my child, Randy, we would be gone. And of course, he's like, I would never do that. Da, da, da. So in right after your first birthday, so in August of 83, we moved because he didn't like my mobile home. So he talked me into leaving it. So now I have to declare bankruptcy. So now I'm working at Storage Tech, and I've started creating a network of people and friends. And we move to a rental house. And my brother died. Okay. So this was actually right after you were born. So back up, but right after you were born in July of 1982. And my brother, my only brother, committed suicide in October of 1982. So here I am with a tiny infant and a 5.5-year-old and an alcoholic husband. We go to California, and that's how that's when your grandparents met you. That's when the whole family met you. I mean, you were the bright light of
Was
that
that
whole,
Chucky's funeral?
yeah, you were the bright light of that.
How old was Chucky when he committed suicide?
He was 20 years old.
So I literally never met him.
No,
I was there at his funeral, but I had never met him when he was
right.
living.
Right. He never got to see you,
Mm.
but he did call the day before to congratulate me for you. And he used to live with us in Boulder. He came for a little bit, and then him and Danny left, and Tom and him didn't get along, and he was into drugs and stuff. So he went back home. He went back to California, and he wasn't even there. He was there about a year. He was there
Uh-huh.
about a year. And
So and so then did you so that's a couple of months after I was born, and then you and Tom split up shortly after that.
we split up the uh no, we split up the following year after that. We were still together because you weren't a year old yet. But then we moved in August of 83 to Boulder, to the house. But that whole time, right? I'm working full time. He's trying at Storage Tech. He's trying to get his paint business off the ground because he decided that he didn't want to, they offered him a position that I didn't know till years later. They offered him a position as a painter, and he didn't take it. It was beneath him, I guess. And so instead he said, no, I'm going to start my own thing. And so that's what he did, during this time. But he was mismanaging money. He had a champagne taste on a beer budget.
And then when did you guys separate? So
Then we finally separated and moved out on my 25th birthday. So that was December of 1983.
all right, so I'm a year old. I'm like a year and a half old.
You're almost a year and a half old. My sister Letty, your Aunt Letty, she came to live with us, and she was living with us in the mobile home, or not in the mobile home, but in the rental house. She came in October, and we left on my birthday night, December. We were at Don and Shelley's. No cell phones at this time. Tom's supposed to come over. He calls, he's at the bar. He tells me to come and pick him up. I could tell he'd been drinking. And I said, we're in the middle of dinner, and I'll come pick you after that. Well, obviously that didn't go over real well, right? So we get there, and we're all in the car. We're all in the car. And he throws my cake out in my birthday cake out the window while we're driving. And it's very tense. Your brother now it's like 6.5 or whatever, and he's old enough to know that it's not a good scene. I told him and Letty to take you upstairs, and then when we get home, we proceed to have an argument, and it gets very heated. And he swung at me and clipped the top of my head just with his hand. But I called the police and I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. And
This is
so,
on your birthday.
yeah, yeah, it's on my birthday. So the 25th, yeah, I try not to think about that one too much. But this is on my birthday, and
So he missed your birthday. So what happened was he missed your birthday dinner. He was at the bar. Then you go get him. Then all this stuff unfolds. Then he hits you. Because this is, these are the stories that Randy tells me about. He remembers those encounters. He remembers being at the safe house. He remembers the yelling. Like, the only thing I really remember is I remember being at the bar with Tom very young. I remember because I remember eating cherries, which is funny because that's what Jasper and Liam like to do. They like to eat the cherries, and I used to eat the cherries out of the like little thing that would sit up on the bar, and then I would play like the video games.
and you were little, you got to remember that. So that's when we left. That night is when we physically we never lived with him again.
Yeah,
But he was still in the, he was still there at that time. He was still living in
still in
Colorado.
the area and like would see him
Right.
occasionally or whatever.
But I I had to work all day. So he would take you. He would take you with him because I'm not going to pay for a babysitter. He's not working.
I see. That makes more sense because I mean, I must have been still. So I must have seen him still when I was like 3 or 4, like old enough to
Oh yeah.
remember the bar because he wasn't. So he didn't have a job then, really, for like years. You're working during the day. He's
Yeah.
watching me,
He was
taking me to the
self-employed.
bar. Yeah, and then, um, I got it. So at this point, you're 25. You've been divorced twice. You have 2 children, 2 abortions, single mom. You're making. Go ahead.
$5.65. Oh no, I
You're
had a
starting to
little
make more
bit
money.
more. I was making when I started working for Chuck, I was making almost $7.
All right, so Chuck pulls you out of the cafeteria role and he goes like, "Hey, you're going to come like join me." So now you're making $7 an hour, but you had insurance. And then were we on food stamps?
Yes, we were on. We were able to get on WIC and a little bit on, and what happened was. Do you want to know what happened?
So and then I remember we used to live in the dungeon. So this must have been before. So this was after you left Tom, we lived in a dungeon or we lived in
Yeah.
the
Okay.
dungeon.
And you don't remember it because you were less
I
than
don't
2 years old.
I only
So,
remember Randy telling me about it.
so the night we left, after the cops came, we all went to Uncle Charlie's house, and we stayed in his basement. His basement was finished. We stayed in his basement for 2 weeks. This was, gotta remember, this is in December in Colorado.
Mm.
The first December that your Aunt Letty's there. And it's actually in 83, and we had worst blizzards ever that year. And so we end up going to Charlie's, and I wanted to get my own place. And so we needed to find our place. And so I did. We found a place. And so Letty and I call it the dungeon. It was the dungeon. And basically it was in downtown Boulder. It was under a business. And the front door was in the back alleyway. It had no walls in your Aunt Letty's room, just 1x2s and installation. It had no ceilings. It was just the wires and the
Like
insulation.
exposed.
It's all
Mhm.
exposed. And there was just a little closet, walk-in closet, and that's where Randy had a bed. That was it. He had a little twin mattress on the floor. And then the kitchen didn't have any formica. It was actually duct taped. The counters were duct taped. We had a tiny little table. But they had we had this big furnace in the middle of what was our kitchen, and you were crawling around at this time. And I was always so afraid you were going to burn yourself because it was big and it was in the middle. And you and I had another room to ourselves. But you slept with me in the bed. That we had a mattress on the floor. And I don't even know if we had a couch. It had 2 chairs and a tiny table. I don't even think we had a couch. I don't remember how much. And we were there for 4 months.
Wow.
Your grandpa came, he wanted us to move back to California. I didn't want to leave. I had a network, I had a good job, and I wanted to raise you guys in Colorado. I remember I didn't want to leave again. And so Letty got a job in Littleton and took the bus. And then we finally moved to Louisville. It's when we moved to Louisville, and we moved in with a bus driver friend of hers. And then we weren't there very long, and then we just started moving. And the thing was, Louisville was real close to our job, my job. And so we moved, for the record. Let's get the record
Yeah. How many
straight.
times did we? So how many times did we move? Because we were bouncing around a bit.
Right. So from the time you were born until the time you were 11 years old, we moved 9 times in 11 years.
Wow.
But this is the thing, Rory. The reason we moved so much was every year your mom would make a little bit more money, and we would get a little better place.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean,
we were upgrading. Well, the mobile home you abandoned and when
yeah,
declared bankruptcy, but then
right. And so I didn't have any credit for 7 years.
Right.
For 7 years, I didn't have any credit, and I had to learn to pay rob Paul, pay Peter, and I got really good at that. And I was trying to build my credit back up.
So how did we make it, right? Like I'm trying to do the math here going like, $6 an hour, raising 2
Well,
kids. Like I mean, we have, AJ and I have more resources. We have people to help, and I'm just going, how do you raise 2 kids, work during the day, raise these 2 kids? Letty is there, but like
but Letty's
we're
not
on,
living with us anymore.
she
No,
moved out,
she's
but
moved out.
somewhere in those 5 years, I mean, Tom is gone, Dan is gone, parents are gone, your family is, you got, how are you covering the spread here?
Well, there was several things. First of all, life was a lot simpler back then. You got to remember that life was a lot simpler back then. I didn't need a lot of money. We didn't need a lot of money, but God provided. He always provided. You guys never slept in the car. You never went to bed hungry. Now, we did a lot of top ramen. We did mac and cheese, and your mom was very, you know, in smart in I did a lot of improvising, and I made mac and cheese casseroles with tuna and hot dogs and all kinds of things. And so that was one thing. And Don and Shelley in the early days, I mean, we would go over at dinner time. They would invite us for dinner. But the biggest factor was all the guys. I worked at tech support, remember, with these engineers. And Chuck, he was your godfather. And he loved us. I mean, him and Marianne, his wife, we would, we'd go out to dinner. You guys went everywhere with me. Everywhere. We didn't have babysitters. You went with me. And so we would go to the pizza, whether we went to the pizza bar place or wherever, Trail Dust. You remember the Trail Dust?
I remember the Trail Dust. Yeah.
Ken Campion used to pay for us to go to the Trail Dust. And you guys loved that place. And so I had a
Chuck this
family
is your
with these.
boss. So this is your boss that's
My boss
looking
and all
after
my
us and all
coworkers.
their friends, all their coworkers.
My coworkers. So Eric, he was my banker. He was our banker. He was one of
Meaning
my.
he's loaning you money, not an actual banker, meaning he's
No,
loaning
he's
you money.
loaning me money, right? So one of the things was I never had to pay interest, but I always paid him back. And so that taught you guys, you need to pay your debts. And one year you wanted to go see the Faces. You were like,
Oh, in South Dakota, Mount
6
Rushmore.
and 7. And you were like, Mommy, I want to go see the Faces. Can we go see the Faces for our summer break? And so I saved enough money, $200, and we were going to go. But at that time, the car that I had needed tires, and one tire blew up, and the guy was like, you you can't go anywhere on these tires. And it's definitely not with 2 kids in the car. So I had to take that money and buy 4 sets of, a set of tires. And Eric gave us the money to go on vacation. And at $25 a week, I paid him back. It took me 6 months to pay him back. But you got to go see the faces. And we got to go camping. Which you didn't like, but Randy likes camping.
I still don't like camping. I mean, maybe that's why I don't like camping. It was like
You don't like
the free
camping and
thing
you
to
didn't like fishing. You didn't
do
like
and
being
getting
outside.
all dirty, right?
But we went to a lot of parks when you were little. That was the other thing we did. We visited all kinds of parks. They were free. We went to dollar movies. We would go to McDonald's and rob your piggy banks. That's how we would go. I would get the change out of do you remember pulling the change out of my car and my console?
uh-huh. And
And
so
so that's what we would do. And we had friends, but the biggest friend was one of my other coworkers, Dano. Dano's been in your life since you were born. And he didn't have a family at the time. And he spent a lot of time helping me with you guys, paying for jackets at Christmas. And he was the reason you went to kung fu school. So yeah, I mean,
for these people, these are your coworkers and your friends are the ones buying us Christmas presents.
yeah.